Hey guys, for your virtual day, I'm going to give you guys video notes over everything else that we have left kind of in the sports unit. I know it's been kind of weird with the weather days and stuff like that, but this is a way to at least get you guys the information quick so that we can focus on projects and things like that next week. So, a little recap over what we talked about. We looked at the history of St. Louis baseball. How they used to basically name all teams after their socks. Eventually, they became the St. Louis Browns. Um, and then in 1900, they changed to the Cardinals. Those are the minor league clubs. Some famous players there. Kansas City did the same thing, a little different history. They haven't been around as long. Baseball in Kansas City has been around for a very long time, but not the Royals specifically. And then here are some of their major players that they've had. And then we took a long look at the Negro Leagues. You cannot discount really what the Monarchs meant to Kansas City, but also baseball in general. They were that good all the time. Not only were they good, because they were in the black district in Kansas City. A lot of the black folks, they didn't have to go to any other part of town and experience the racism that other places had. And so black folks had their own hospitals, their own law offices, businesses, car washes, construction companies, insurance companies, pro sports. All of that was right there. And so the Monarchs are really the hub of that in Kansas City for a long time. But now I want to switch over to football. We're going to start with St. Louis and move over to Kansas City. St. Louis has had football on and off for really a long time. As you can see there, since 1923. That's whenever the Monarchs and the Stars were playing. The major teams that we've had from 1960 to 87, there was the St. Louis Cardinals. Yes, that was the same name as the baseball team. And then they eventually moved to Arizona. And so for about a period of 8 years, St. Louis was without a football team. Then the Rams, which used to be in Los Angeles in 1995, got a new owner. She had ties to St. Louis. And so from 95 to 2015, the St. Louis Rams played in St. Louis. And they'd won one Super Bowl. You know anything about Kurt Warner and the Greatest Show on Turf? That was him. I remember that Super Bowl. But eventually there was new ownership. A guy by the name of Stan Kroenke, who has family ties to actually Lincoln, Missouri, just south of us, bought the team and then was there for a couple years and then moved back to Los Angeles, got a nice new stadium, all that stuff. But again, before that, there were the St. Louis All-Stars and the St. Louis Gunners. Before the NFL and AFL were really big, you would have somebody had a little bit of money who hoped to cash in on the sports craze. He would put a team together, really anywhere, play a few games, make a few bucks, and then either fold the team or sell the team pretty quick. And that was pretty common. It wasn't like it is today where it's kind of a difficult process to buy a pro sports franchise. Back then it was a lot easier. But St. Louis actually does still have football right now with the St. Louis Battlehawks. I know you guys know Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. He took a league that actually the WWF executive Vince McMahon had created early on in the early 2000s called the XFL. He bought the league and brought it back, and one of the things was like, hey, there's this dome football stadium in St. Louis. Let's use it. And so the Battlehawks were created, and they still play today. I believe it's called the UFL now. And they're very good. And what's crazy is when you have non-NFL football like this, other than college, you don't really fill stadiums, especially stadiums built for football. The Battlehawks are doing it. They are putting together games where it's nearly sold out top to bottom in that stadium. So it's pretty fantastic. Now, Kansas City has also had football prior to the Chiefs, and I know I need to update the 2 Super Bowl wins. But prior to Kansas City, though, there was actually a team called the Kansas City Blues, but then a year later changed to the Kansas City Cowboys. And then after 1926, they did not move to Dallas, they just folded. Because again, this was before the AFL or the NFL. But in 1963, a guy by the name of Clark Hunt, the Hunt family has money in the oil business, which we've talked about, pretty lucrative business, had a team in Houston called the Houston Texans, saw that there was a potential for a pretty important fan base in Kansas City. So in 1963, moved the Dallas Texans to Kansas City, not Houston Texans, Dallas Texans to Kansas City, and have been there ever since. So obviously multiple Super Bowls. Some of our major players, that's Lynn Dawson smoking at halftime of the Super Bowl he won. Tony Gonzalez, who was my personal favorite, and then obviously Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, and then honestly I could probably go on and on and on. But Kansas City's had a tie with football, and hopefully that stays. Now we're going to move over to soccer, hockey, and basketball real quick. Soccer, we don't really think of American soccer in high regard, but actually Missouri specifically has real hard ties to the soccer community. The St. Louis area was actually what they call a soccer hotbed. In the American team that won the World Cup in 1950, half of those players were actually from St. Louis. So we've had in our state a huge tie to soccer. And I think that shows with who we have as our pro team. So Sporting KC is the original one that we got. That's also owned by the Hunt family. They were called the KC Wizards for a while, but eventually they changed the name to Sporting KC. Have been pretty good, pretty consistent over the years. In 2023, St. Louis added the St. Louis City Soccer Club, which is their stadium's brand new, looks amazing. But then we're also the home of the KC Current, which is one of the women's league teams. And what's interesting about that is that, Patrick Mahomes and his wife Brittany are co-owners of that. But also, they just built the first women's only pro sports stadium in the entire country. Like the first one is in Kansas City. So that's actually pretty special as well. And they've been pretty consistent winners over time. A little bit of hockey. Hockey's probably one of my favorite sports to watch live. If you haven't seen it, it's as fast as basketball with the hitting of football, and they want fighting, so it's pretty amazing. The original teams that we had in Missouri were the St. Louis Flyers from 28 to 42, and then from 44 to 53. They were a minor league team, but they did, and the reason why they're important is because they established hockey in the St. Louis area and in Missouri, which was big. Eventually, you also had the St. Louis Eagles. They moved from Ottawa. They eventually moved back to Canada to become the Senators. They ended after one season. Now, the one team that we do have is the Blues. The Blues came, so you have what's called the original six in the NHL, the original six teams. The first expansion team after that was the St. Louis Blues and kind of a handful of others. And so they came in 1967. Now it says there we've only won one Stanley Cup, which is their Super Bowl basically. And we have, but the first 3 years of our existence, we were in the Stanley Cup Finals. So we've put together some pretty important winners, impactful winners over our history. And so Brett Hull, David Backes, Ryan O'Reilly, Jordan Bennington's the goalie there. He's kind of interesting. He's still with us, but he's the only goalie to win the Stanley Cup. And so it's our flagship hockey team right here. I'm a huge fan. Now, we also do have a minor league hockey team called the KC Mavericks. And I know several of you may have been to games or at least passed by the stadium. They are a affiliate of the Seattle Kraken, which is a new team. Lamar Hunt Jr. is the owner of them. And so that kind of helped reestablish hockey back into the Kansas City area, even though the stadium's in Independence, I believe. But before that, we did have a little bit of hockey with the Kansas City Scouts. The Kansas City Scouts were from 74 to 76. They eventually moved to Colorado, where there's a little bit more of a hotbed for hockey out there, being in the Rocky Mountains. That's their logo right there. But it's nice to see, even though they left after just a couple of years, we're getting more people in. Last thing I want to talk about is basketball. Pro basketball. We've actually had pro basketball in and out of Missouri. I think we'll see it happen again soon. The Kansas City Kings, which became the Sacramento Kings, they were a part of the Kansas City area community for a very long time, 72 to 85. because of financial issues and I guess lack of attendance at the time. They did share home games with Omaha for a period, but eventually they just moved to Sacramento. And Nate Archibald is one of the most important players there. They've also had the St. Louis Hawks, which were around from 54 to 65. They were part of the NBA, around for a little bit. I think they ended up moving to Atlanta. And then the Spirit of St. Louis team, which is an ABA team, was from 74 to 76 as well. So we've had a pro basketball presence in our state, and it's kind of hard to tell whether football, baseball, or basketball is the more important sport in our state when it comes to the local and higher levels. So we'll see. Hopefully we get a pro team back. All right, guys, that's all I have for the sports. Make sure you get these notes down, and I will see you guys soon.